right. Hello and welcome back to Size of Broken Man. I'm Marcus. I'll be the host for today, and I'm joined by my awesome co-host with the great Wi-Fi.
Juan, yeah, my Wi-Fi is being weird. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and today we have a very special, great guest on that we're very excited to have, and his name is
Tanner Rima, and I'm super excited to be on with you guys today.
Yeah, man. We're happy to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to like introduce how we know each other real quick. Well, actually, Tanner, you said you wanted to take this, so why not talk about how you know us?
Yeah, so I mean, Marcus, man, it was middle school, right? Or was it at the end of elementary school? I feel like it was middle school.
It was like sixth grade. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we hung out and I came over to your house and we played Lego Star Wars. And oh man, I was no good. But then you moved and it was tough, but came back around in high school. That was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And Juan, I mean, we kind of got to know each other in high school as well. We were kind of introduced through friends, and
Yep.
Juan actually kind of circled back around into my life again as well because one of my other friends knew him from, was it school, Juan? That you guys knew each other, you and Will?
Yeah, we did that. It's called C-Tech, and we did that together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big surprise for me. I was like, oh, you know Tanner.
Yeah. This big old web of connections. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah. So we've all known each other kind of for varying times, but overall for a while. So something that's very interesting that Tanner's very well read on, that we've brought him on here today to talk about, is cancel culture. And Tanner, if you just want to like introduce us to what cancel culture is and kind of the whole, I don't know, culture around it, you can go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would kind of say that cancel culture is like a widespread like withdrawal of support for someone or like a company, just any sort of organization after they've done something that the public eye kind of considers objectionable or like not up to standard with social values now. So they kind of like withdraw their support in mass from those companies, people, etc. So that's kind of how I would give that definition. Cancel culture is a tough one because it's had its spots in different movements like the Me Too movement and stuff like that, where it can kind of be used for good. But especially now in a more modern, like, just recently, it's taken kind of a bad turn in that they'll use it to kind of end careers, kind of slander different companies for things that are a little bit questionable, that may not be necessarily appropriate to cancel them for.
Yeah, and something that I've kind of seen throughout, because we're going to talk about a few cases today where cancel culture may or may not have come off as effectively as it wanted to, is that it's difficult because the people that are trying to cancel other people or wherever they're coming from, they're usually coming from a place of good, and they want to make the world a better place. So it's difficult in a way to try to combat them, because in their hearts, like, it's not like they're trying to destroy these other people's livelihoods like unnecessarily or anything like that,
No, and that's exactly true. Like, everybody has their own view of the social world and how it should run and what's okay and what's not, which is why cancel culture kind of goes back and forth, because it's hard. There's no concrete definition for every person. So one case in particular that I kind of have done some research on is the professor from the University of Chicago. His name's Dorian Abbot, and he was scheduled to do a couple of lectures. He's a geophysics professor, and so that was kind of the main focus of his lectures. But he actually had been canceled from the docket at MIT because he has this kind of different view on higher education and how student slots in higher education schools should be allocated. I mean, as we all know, like, the way it's been done is, like, what you allocate certain spots, like a certain number of spots for, different races.
It's called affirmative action, isn't it?
What was that?
Affirmative action.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So there's kind of these different policies that allow for inclusion of different genders and races. And he believes that in higher education, especially, that shouldn't be the case because, people work hard to get there. And so it should all be merit based rather than leaving those spots open for somebody who may not necessarily be as qualified. They may also be as qualified, but, that was kind of his thinking along with that, and that just huge outcry followed that, and that's kind of why he was canceled at MIT. And people are going back and forth because Princeton, another university he was scheduled to talk at, they were like, yeah, screw that, like we're gonna let this guy talk. It just, I don't know. What are your guys' opinion on this? Like, what do you think it should be for higher education?
Yeah, so before I actually say my opinion on it, I would just like to say normally like universities or companies or whatever, when someone like when one of their like staff gets canceled for anything, like it typically goes really bad for the staff, and they try to save face with like in any way they can. So the reason this story is kind of very interesting is due to the fact that uh another major university, Princeton, backed him up on it and was like, let's give him a platform. I'm assuming not necessarily to talk about his personal views on merit and equality and all that, but rather like just to give his like his intended speech on, I believe it was originally it was going to be like life on other planets or life in like the universe, if I read the article correctly. But to say what he did, it's obviously like a big risk because there was huge controversy, like i.e. why he was canceled. But my personal view on it is that damn, this is scary.
It is.
It is because like
it's tough, and like he even takes it a step further. He goes, he basically says the current policies, their biases against men and Asian Americans, like this affirmative action, all this, those are measures that are targeting men and Asian American men. And I mean, this guy is not just going to level 1. He's at like level 10. He's up there.
Exactly. Yeah. So obviously for us, like, this is just pretty scary because like, no, but I personally believe that I understand why affirmative action is a thing. I really do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I do kind of agree. I lean more to the side of merit and individuality rather than kind of a group identity.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I don't know, Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, like, affirmative action was a huge thing, especially at our school that we talked about, because I think I've mentioned in the past, but our school was very diverse in high school, and so it was a very relevant topic for lots of students. As far as like affirmative action goes and his views, I am also more on the side of, like, hey, if you're qualified, then that's all that should matter. But I understand that the mentality behind affirmative action is that so many people that are putting in as much or more effort than people who are perhaps coming from more privileged upbringings or this sort of thing. Like if there's some sort of like, if there's a Black woman who is living with poverty with no dad or something like that, and she's working so hard and she just falls a little bit short, affirmative action is there to give her that opportunity because she has worked really hard for it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, can I give an example real quick?
Sure.
Me being of like a Mexican like background, right? Because I'm Mexican. A good example is that I was brought into like the AP or the honors program. I think 7th grade. If I'm not mistaken, 7th grade.
Sure.
But like even during high school, like during summers, I wouldn't get to have fun. I had to work construction and this, that, and the other. And I knew some friends that went to different schools that even though they were like involved in the AP program at their schools and that, they still worked like hard jobs. So and in that sense, this is why I say I understand what affirmative action is trying to accomplish. But at the end of the day, I do believe that merit is kind of more important. It's not to say that like people who do go like get into like these prestigious universities through affirmative action aren't any less intelligent, but they probably are a little bit less qualified due to the fact that they had other issues going on. in their lives, to which, yeah, to like what Marcus said, if a person, someone who doesn't have to work while going to school is more likely more qualified than someone who like goes to school and has to work full time. Or
Yeah, definitely. And like, so in that way, it's the kind of argument for affirmative action is like, how much do you value like the small skill gap between, the actual merit standard and what affirmative action is making up for? How much do you value that over giving opportunity to perhaps those
Yeah.
people that are less privileged?
See, that's kind of what, as we were talking, I kind of thought about. Like, you kind of have to decide which one you want to lean towards, because it's either going to be opportunity or merit. Like, that's kind of what it boils down to. Because if you're in the running for these Ivy League higher education schools, like, you're not failing, you're not dumb. Like, you're succeeding at an incredible level. But you may not have had the same opportunity, which is why they give you that boost. Or on the other hand, like somebody who's achieved more and may have the merit to be in these spots already had the opportunity. So you can kind of see it as merit versus opportunity in a little ways. um but I was going to kind of flip this around for you guys a little bit. In terms of cancel culture, would you say that on either side of this table somebody would deserve to be canceled for their opinions? Like, if like, Dorian Abbot, he's saying, affirmative action, it's not doing us any good, we need merit all the way. Does that deserve to be canceled any more or less than if somebody's like, well, all these people deserve the opportunities, forget merit, let's go on based on what they, could be able to do? Do you think either one of those sides deserves to be canceled, have that kind of backlash that Dorian Abbott's been facing?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Because like, regardless of whether or not we agree with him, like, it doesn't matter. It's more of an issue of like how entitled people are to their own opinions and expressing those own opinions,
Sure.
without having to have their career suffer any major blows or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I personally like, I don't know. I've seen a few like extreme quotes from his end, but still like being canceled for stuff that like it would be one thing if he was lecturing about that, but the fact that his lectures don't have anything to do with any of this merit thing that he is definitely behind, I think it's kind of ridiculous that he's being canceled for opinions that really, unless people do their research, like he's not promoting it, he's not talking about it or anything like that. So that's
Exactly.
kind of where I stand on that sort of thing. What do you think, Juan?
So I personally believe, before we even like I can even give an answer, can you, Tanner, specifically, can you talk about like what happens when a person is canceled in like at an individual like standpoint? So like what could have happened to Dorian?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Juan. So speaking strictly in hypotheticals here, like, we've seen examples in the past of just the absolute devastation it can have to a person or a company. Just off the top of my head, I can think about like James Charles, and I know that's a pretty popular name, but he has lost countless, endorsements, makeup brand partners, etc. And I'm not here to talk about, whether James Charles was, guilty of being canceled or
Yeah.
not, but strictly on cancel culture, like, we've seen what it can do. It happened to a popular rapper, DaBaby, where he lost performances at lots of different music festivals and stuff like that. Like, this man hypothetically could, lose his career, his livelihood. It's just the effects of cancel culture. They can range from, mild to like everybody blows it off, this isn't a big deal, or like this dude, he goes from college
Ruined. Yeah.
professor to unemployed.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
just, it's tough, you never know the repercussions.
Yeah. So I kind of just wanted people to know like the actual repercussions of being canceled. Um, my point of view though is like, regardless of what side you're on, like I think cancel culture is pretty toxic for the most part. Uh, like in some cases it's like, well deserved. There can be disagreements, perhaps if I were to play devil advocates, I'd say no, yeah, the guy, or like, well, you guys are agreeing with it, so I'll say no, like inclusion and equity, everything, all that's important, and it should be like prioritized over merit. Um, but even then, no one deserves to be canceled to to any level, especially if it's like an everyday person. It's a college professor, like like why?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely see your point on that. Um, and it's actually funny because coming up, we're gonna have some. I have some pretty controversial examples, and I don't know. Are we ready to move into something like that? Because
Yeah, let's go for it.
Go for it. Yeah,
all
let's go.
right, all right. So I'm gonna start off strong. This is something I felt strongly about. So this is Demi Lovato, and I'm gonna lay a little groundwork as to kind of what happened. So Demi Lovato, I don't remember where this took place. I'm feeling like it's New York, but the location isn't really necessary. Um, so Demi Lovato walks into this yogurt shop, right? And okay, I don't want to misgender them, so I'm gonna refer to them as a they. Um, so they walk into um, a, a yogurt shop and they see advertised these fat-free options. They see fat-free yogurt, fat-free cookies, stuff like that. Just things that are a little bit healthier alternatives. And they take to Twitter and they talk about how, they're perpetuating diet culture. This this yogurt shop is single-handedly like fat shaming people, saying you should be eating. And they talk about how they wanted to cry because they saw, you know, fat-free products being advertised. And it's not like they didn't have regular products. They just saw that there were sugar-free and fat-free options, and they were like, well, that's perpetuating, fat shaming, stuff like that. And so that had some severe repercussions um, on that store, like what we talked about before, where it can range from people just blowing it off to a business struggling because of that. Demi Lovato's got however many millions of followers, and they're all at her beck and call, and they hear that and they think, well, cancel them. And here we are, and the store, has been under so much criticism and fire. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
I must say, when I saw like the tweets, or it was a tweet thing that you sent
Uh-huh.
us,
Uh-huh.
I was so confused.
Yeah.
And like, to our listeners, if you're confused, like, that, I think that like in and of itself will kind of tell you like kind of how, I don't want to say pointless it is, but I was like super confused.
Yeah.
We can post the tweets and the pictures that she was talking about on the screen.
Yeah.
So if you're on YouTube, there you go. If you're not on YouTube, then you can go there and check them out. But yeah, it's quite interesting. It's at times it's difficult to tell what she's really mad about.
And on top of that, they had a video, and I believe it was on Instagram. It might have been on TikTok, but they go on this tangent, right, about how like the owners reached out and they were like, we didn't mean to cause any harm, like we just offer these options to people as dietary things. I work at Waffle F, and we have a gluten-free option that's also vegan. Some people just pick that option to be healthier, right? Because you never know what people want. And the company reached out. They were like, we didn't mean to cause you like any harm, we just offer those for people that want those options. And Demi Lovato was like, no, like what you're doing isn't helping people out.
Yeah.
It's like causing eating disorders, it's causing all this. And I just I can't get behind it, honestly.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like,
oh, go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So her big thing behind it is that, or yeah, they have. Well, I think you mentioned this, but they have an eating disorder, or at least they've been dealing with an eating disorder. Demi Lovato has been, and her big thing was that it was triggering them, and obviously that's a terrible thing to deal with. And like,
Yeah.
this is another difficult part of cancel culture because of where they're coming from. In their case, they're coming from a big kind of stance of vulnerability where it is something that they have to deal with. And obviously, I don't doubt that it was affecting them.
Sure.
But at the same time, that is kind of a you problem, you know?
Yeah.
It's not the store's fault at all for, offering as many options as possible for all the people that, want to have it. And that's perfectly valid. I mean, like, I have no idea why Demi Lovato decided to pinpoint this frozen yogurt shop exactly. It was just some local store in, I think, like LA or something. And they decided to attack this store specifically when like literally half of USA offers all these sorts of options just like they do. So
Yeah.
I personally think that the store could have handled it a lot better, or not the store per se, not like the placement of actual products, but just on the way they reached out. It like made them automatically guilty because they chose to reach out that way. If they like, this is me being stupid, right? But if they would have said like, oh, we just recently got those products, they were new, so like newer products at the front of the store or whatever,
Yeah.
they would have saved face. But it's the fact that they were like, oh, sorry, we didn't mean to offend you. It made them seem like they did in fact have like a malicious intent, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah.
super confusing story.
That actually brings up another point about cancel culture, which is that cancel culture favors the side with the biggest following, right?
Yeah.
So we all know that there's two sides to every story, but the story that's going to get heard is the Disney star turned pop star turned actress, who's got millions of followers on every platform you can imagine, right? Like their followers who may do research, may not do research. I'm going to assume that most of them would not do the research, are going to take everything at face value. And that's where the toxicity of the cancel culture comes in, where, you've got all these people who don't necessarily know the whole story coming out and being like, this store, like, that's not the spot to go. You want to go to a different yogurt store. Like, this one's fat shaming. This one is perpetuating eating disorders, and how is this store going to defend itself? Even if it's a bigger store, has maybe, 100,000 followers, that's going to be a 10th, a 100th of, the following that's going to be, not like banging down their doors. You know what I mean?
and like that also kind of leads into the effectiveness of cancel culture because obviously Demi Lovato and her fans, like presumably Demi's fans are probably in a younger age demographic where they don't necessarily care as much about being informed about whatever is happening. But at the same time, this kind of leads into the next person we'll be talking about, which is Dave Chappelle. Lots of Dave Chappelle's fans, like they absolutely don't care like at all about
No F's given.
any of this cancel culture stuff. Or yeah, man. So
Dave
like,
Chappelle.
in terms of like, yeah, effectiveness, because we were talking about how numbers have a big thing to do with it, but also just like Dave Chappelle, who was being canceled here, instead of like a frozen yogurt shop where it doesn't necessarily have fans per se or like a very loyal, strong support group. Dave Chappelle does have a strong, loyal support group that, most importantly, doesn't care about being canceled. So we can kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Oh man, that one's an interesting one because this kind of brings up a new aspect to the story, which is, can you cancel somebody who just doesn't care?
Yeah.
Because a lot of being canceled is how you take it versus, whether or not it happens. So Dave Chappelle, kind of to give a little bit of background on that, he recently released a new Netflix special, and the name is slipping me. But it's,
I think it's called The Closer.
That's it, The Closer, yeah. And on it there were a lot of transphobic comments and kind of some jabs at the LG. I mean, jabs may not be fair. They were pretty hard swings, at the LGBTQ community. Like he really didn't hold back. And I feel like comedians kind of get a little buffer from cancel culture. You know what I mean? Like comedians have the job to say things that are a little bit off brand where you kind of think about it and you're like, man, I don't know if you can say that.
Yeah.
Um, but apparently Dave Chappelle took it to a point where it's not where that's just he didn't really get a pass on that one. And so I mean I couldn't even tell one of the jokes on this podcast. So
Yeah,
he
yeah.
yeah. And so, obviously there was a huge amount of backlash. There were transgender Netflix employees that were petitioning to, have it removed, to have Dave Chappelle canceled. And the owner of Netflix, like the top dog, actually kind of backed up Dave Chappelle and said, like we give him liberty over his content, over his media. And, he says something that's a little bit offensive, like that's on him, but he gets views. And man, this one is tough for me because obviously like the goal in life is to make everybody feel included, right? Like you don't want anybody to feel bad about who they are, but at the same time, like you've got it's one thing when you're scrolling on Instagram and you're subject to media that you don't have control over. But with Netflix, right? You go on Netflix, you're like, man, I've heard a lot about this transphobic thing. I'm a little bit more sensitive. I could choose to watch it and potentially put myself at risk, or I could choose not to watch it and kind of, take myself out of that. I don't know. See, this is tough for me. I kind of want to hear what you guys are thinking.
Yeah. So I didn't watch the full special, but I did watch clips on YouTube and like I was in awe.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, but going back to I guess the original point was, can you be canceled if you truly don't care? Probably if I'm being 100% honest, you can't. You could like it will affect you 100%. Like you could perhaps lose
Sure.
brand deals. I think a good example, maybe you guys know him. His name is David Dobrik. He like
Uh-huh.
within the past like year or something, he got canceled big time, but like he's back already, And Dave Chappelle, I feel, is probably, well, no, he's at a higher level than Dobrik is. And I guess another point is that people they're gonna try to cancel him, but like, let's say he makes another special. The human curiosity is just too strong to like, even if like you hate him, you're gonna like switch on the TV and be like, okay, let's see what he said this time, just to be mad. But you're still giving him money. You're still giving him views.
Yeah.
So like, and especially if he doesn't care, because I guarantee he probably doesn't. He's like, whatever. He's still like making money, so he doesn't really lose anything from it. If you're still gonna go back after you cancel him just to be mad at him again, and he's still getting money. So I don't think like if you truly do not care about what cancel culture says, you really can't be canceled.
That's
Yeah.
interesting because I have slightly a different opinion on that because
Ooh, let's go.
like in terms of Dave Chappelle, like obviously he's got a huge following. He's a celebrity, pretty much. He is. So even though he's going to take hits from this sort of thing, you can attribute it to his fan base or how he deals with the whole cancelization thing. But yeah, if people try to cancel him, he doesn't have a very good chance of being canceled. But if we go back to like this the Chicago profession, but for example, like obviously he didn't want to be canceled, and even though he had all of his opinions out there and anything like that, I don't think he directly addressed the whole cancelization thing, and I don't think there was anything he really could have said to kind of make it not happen. He's very fortunate, I think, that Princeton and Princeton students kind of backed him and said, hey, no, we're here for freedom of speech regardless of what he says, and like he's not even talking about that, so let's have him here. But if they didn't do that, there's really not a lot he could have done, because like the U Chicago board, I think, demoted him from various positions that he was at when they found out about the things that he was saying, and that came to light when MIT and their alumni kind of canceled him. So I think you definitely have a bit more protection if you're a higher celebrity and you have that fan base there. But just like college professors aren't exactly everyday folk because they're big enough to be canceled. But there is certainly a cap where if you don't have enough power or enough influence or enough support behind you, then you'll be canceled no matter what you do.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to, I kind of have a middle ground opinion on kind of what you both said, which is that, you can't be canceled like psychologically, like your mindset on being canceled. If Dave Chappelle gets canceled, like everybody could be against him. He could say, I don't care. It could not affect his day to day. It could not affect him emotionally, psychologically, any of that. But it's undeniable that if you get canceled, and I'm talking about like really canceled, it can have an effect on things like your income, your views in the future, your ability to stay profitable in the future, market in the future, stuff like that. So, for example, in the case of Dave Chappelle, kind of giving a hypothetical scenario, right? He could come out and be and use the same rhetoric where he says, I like you can't cancel me. No, nobody can cancel me. Like I don't care if you choose to cancel me. If you say you're canceled, then that's fine. Like I'm canceled. Whatever. Let's move on. And he can say that, and he can have that mindset. But and like I said, this is hypothetical. But say he does, come out with another special. Maybe this time he gets half the views, half the income. The venue doesn't sell out. And I know that that's unlikely, but just in the sense of cancel culture as a whole, it's not entirely impossible, where you could have a scenario where, even though they say they can't be canceled, the monetary and, demographics of, what they're doing suffers quite a bit, or maybe marginally, but you can say psychologically you can't be canceled, but the physical effects can't necessarily be mitigated.
Oh, I actually did want to talk about. I did want to ask you, Tanner. What about people? Earlier, I said sometimes it's deserving. What are your thoughts on that? Like, let's say I'm in the Walmart parking lot, and then I get out of my car, and I accidentally, I don't know. So, and there's some, like, let's call him a racist white guy, because let's be real here. Typically, that's what they are. And then they just start calling me all sorts of, like, you dirty Mexican, this, that, and the other. And let's say I record it, right? Which I wouldn't, because I have an Android and the quality's not great. And I'm not going to post it on like TikTok or Instagram and be like, hey.
Yeah, that's too embarrassing, man. Come on.
This is way too embarrassing. But let's say I had an iPhone, right? And I recorded it and I posted on like online. And then people were like, okay, what's his name? What's his address? And they take canceling to a whole like level. There's this guy on TikTok, Tanner, you may know. His name is Tizzy Ent, something like that. And he's like, to me, he's like the face of like canceling people, like to like a whole nother level. I'm not saying what he does is like good or bad. It's fairly entertaining if I'm being 100% honest. But yeah, like if he'll find the name of anyone that like a viral video goes up on TikTok of them being super racist. He'll like find their address, like their name, all sorts of information, just so people can cancel them. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, I guess on that, in those situations.
Sure. In that case, I would kind of just ask the audience, like what's the end goal? Like, what are you trying to do by canceling this person, right? Like, they could offer an apology, but on their platform, no one would see it.
Exactly.
Like, when it comes to canceling, like you could make this guy lose his job, but like more likely than not, it's not a high stakes job. You could find a different one. Like in that specific example, right? Like sometimes there are consequences to, racism, doing stuff like that. I think that there should be consequences to doing stuff like that. And I think that companies should be able to see when, they're hiring somebody who's racist or sexist or, bigoted. And I think in some cases it can be good because you can think that you have a quality employee, a quality husband, anybody in your life, and you can see that, and it kind of shows a little bit of their true colors. But also at the same time, like, is it worth ruining somebody's life over?
Exactly.
Like a bunch of people can admit that it's wrong, but if 100,000 people are saying like ruin this guy's life, like, is that worth it? That's the thing. Like, you can't take back putting something on the internet, and so you got to think about what you're doing to somebody's life, even if they were doing something bad. You got to think about like the tried and true repercussions of what'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. Did you have anything to add, Marcus?
But yeah, that kind of leads into can versus should, because if you look at the can of canceling, technically all of cancellation is entirely legal, and that's why it happens all the time.
Sure.
There's nothing by law that says that canceling can't happen or anything like that, and that's why people get away with it. But as we get into the should, it becomes a lot more gray because there are case-by-case scenarios that maybe canceling, is something that needs to happen. And it's very difficult to tell one way from another, especially with the mob mentality that is pretty inherent with cancel culture, because everybody just kind of piles up behind one person. If they say like, hey, this person's homophobic, it's pretty easy to cancel somebody if you just say that, and then you'll have like at least 50,000 Twitter mobbers going after this person.
Sure.
So there's not a lot of deliberate thought, or at least from a lot of people who are doing the canceling, because there are always I don't know, maybe like a tenth or maybe like 5% of people of the cancellation mob that actually like are well read on the subject, but everything else behind it, like what happened with Demi Lovato and their fans, where the vast mob is just angry that something is happening and that's why they're attacking it. So in terms of like, should canceling happen and that sort of thing, I don't know, we can take it back to like Dave Chappelle. I think Dave Chappelle is the greatest thing here because in terms of like being a comedian and everything, he does have that buffer, like he said. But I don't know, should comedians have a buffer and all this sorts of thing? Because there aren't, obviously there are comedians that are plenty successful and they're plenty funny, and their careers go just fine without being extensively offensive to anybody.
Sure.
So should that be taken into account, or like, because something I also read earlier was that Dave Chappelle also kind of has a history of like doing LGBT segments in a lot of his comedy specials.
Yeah.
So is there a point where it turns into attacking a group specifically and perpetuating a negative mentality, even if you're presenting it in a comedic light, or is it all just under the name of comedy, and does everything just kind of go if you're a comedian and you make your intentions clear?
Yeah. That's actually, I'm glad you said that, because that brought up something I meant to talk about, but kind of slipped my mind. Dave Chappelle is kind of somebody who I consider an equal opportunity hater. I use a different word, but I won't use that word on the podcast. It's kind of the antithesis to a different mindset where you say, like, love everyone, love men, women, transgender, black, white, Asian, love everybody, right? And when I say Dave Chappelle's an equal opportunity hater, he's like, man, you gotta give crap to Hispanics, you gotta give crap to white dudes, you gotta give crap to women, LGBT, like I swear, Dave Chappelle is one of the most racist dudes to black people I have ever seen. And the dude's black, right?
Yeah.
He's an equal opportunity hater. And so is this one instance taken to the point where it's not just equal opportunity hate, it's like hate speech, Um, I see. That's just it's tough. It's tough.
It's very interesting because I never thought about it that way. Like if I'm being 100% honest, and it makes sense though now. I think because I have seen a couple of his specials, and yeah, I think that that phrase "equal opportunity hater," like if it's perfectly describes him.
I think a big thing with cancel culture is weighing. You kind of have to put it on like a mental scale, right? What you're canceling for. I can understand the the reasoning behind Dave Chappelle's cancellation. Like, regardless of whether you think it's like true or not, I feel like it's pretty universal that there's a claim to it. Like, regardless of my opinion, I can fully admit that there is a claim and like a legitimate reason why I can see people wanting to cancel Dave Chappelle. But on the other hand, I remember in 2020, or I'm sorry, yeah, in 2020, I believe, Charlie D'Amelio, like the famous TikToker, she was canceled because she, in one of her videos, had a vape in her hand, and everybody was outraged. They're like, I don't want my kids seeing this. I don't want, and like, you can't expect anybody in this world to be perfect, right? So you kind of have to put it on a scale. Like, is canceling Charlie D'Amelio over a vape, something that's worthwhile? Probably not. Is canceling Dave Chappelle over, dropping a nuke on trans people verbally? That's up to you, right? It's just, it can be a very, very beneficial tool when somebody's clearly in the wrong. But when you see, and she talks about the psychological trauma of everybody being against her, right? Like, you have to weigh that. You have to weigh, is having a vape in her hand in one of her videos worth, her spending countless hours crying, you know, feeling awful about herself, feeling like she should have done better, like, is it worth it? No, in my opinion, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're gonna go that much into this, but it also kind of connects to the sort of, at least in terms of celebrities, how much responsibility do celebrities have to be good role models for the younger generation or just whoever their fans are? And like with Charlie D'Amelio, like I figure lots of their fans are very young kids, so maybe to a certain extent, like vaping isn't healthy for you. So there is the point there, and there's always the point with cancel culture, which is the thing. But yeah, it's just to what extent does you could call it a sin merit this sort of consequence? And it's so hard to control the consequence too, because you don't know how many people are going to lash out or latch on to this sort of this movement against them. And yeah, once it starts, because of the mob mentality, you really don't know how far it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically with like the D'Amelio case and responsibility, I think I'd just like to say that don't vape, smoke weed. It's a lot better.
Nope, we're cutting that out.
They're gonna cancel this podcast, Juan. They're gonna cancel a podcast.
I'm kidding. No, don't smoke weed. It's bad.
I kind of wanted to ask you guys, what do you think is a positive example of cancel culture? Because I feel like right now it has a super negative connotation, but I believe it can have a positive, benefit to society. And I was wondering if you guys think that too, and if you do, if you know of a specific example off the top of your head.
No, I can say like every like cancel culture moment that I know of is like it's ruined people and like you know because look, like I think like if you do cancel them, I'll use Dobrik as an example. In his case was I think he was a cop, like in one of his videos he gave like alcohol to minors or whatever. um I assume from now on he's not, his mentality when recording videos is not, oh, I don't want to give alcohol to minors. I'll use this as an example. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it's more in the sense that like, okay, I'm going to be careful what I record. You know, his
Mhm.
mentality didn't change at all. He's just going
Mhm.
to be more careful of like what he records, and in that sense. So I don't know if it's like if that's a positive thing, because I guess he's not showing it anymore. But like he didn't really change in any way. And this is an example. I'm not saying this happens at all, but yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't know, as far as like cancel culture goes, I don't think the main aim behind cancel culture is to get the perpetrator to change their mind or change their ways or anything like that.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't think it's that well thought out. It pretty much always comes down to, okay, this person did something bad. How can we ruin them bad enough to the point where their effectiveness or impact on society changes? And that's a pretty brutal way of going about things, but there have been I don't know. In some cases, it has been merited. Like we can talk a little bit about how it's played a hand in the Me Too movement, which Me Too movement has its own problems and that sort of thing. But I think its inception started with Harvey Weinstein, or Weinstein. I don't remember how you say his name, but obviously the things that he was doing to all of Hollywood and in his company in general, it wasn't public or anything like that. But once it came out, that's obviously some pretty major things that he definitely deserved to be canceled for and imprisoned for and all those things like that. At the same time, like, could you call that cancel culture? Because the law was involved, whereas cancel culture is kind of its own law in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, I feel like cancel culture does kind of play the job of the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, the defense, you know. Like um cancel culture, uh it doesn't have laws the way that we have laws, right? Um I feel like once there's a definitive set, I want to say like an actual judicial decision on something, like it moves from cancel culture to just, you know, taking away this person's power. Like
Justice,
Harvey,
maybe.
yeah, justice, exactly. For
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't find that word. Thank you, Juan. Like for Harvey Weinstein, he, you know, I wouldn't say he was canceled. I would say that he was convicted and now he's losing popularity, rightfully so, because of that conviction. I feel like in order to be canceled, there it has to be an air of like mystery, like uncertainty, and you let like the public decide what's it's like a social courtroom.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. Yeah.
if
Um.
you want to, yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
so I kind of did want to say that in instances where people are the victims of cancel culture, a lot of the time they do end up saying like, "Oh, it's freedom of speech," and I think
Mhm.
I'd like to clear that up, because like freedom of speech, according to the Constitution, it's so the government doesn't take away your right to free speech. It's not other people. So like
Mhm.
if you do say something and you get backlash for it, and you get canceled for it, that's that's not the government canceling you.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein, I guess in that sense, that kind of is the government, but his issue wasn't necessarily free speech. And yeah, I just kind of just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with that, where it's not like the government canceling you, it's the people, you know. I kind of wanted to get your guys' opinion on something else, kind of just because we've left a lot of cancel culture and stuff open-ended. Um, when it comes to consequences, excuse me, and social issues, like obviously there are things that are right and wrong, right? So like if somebody's, you know, publicly using like racial slurs of like a celebrity or something, or um, you know, there's a number of examples. But do you think cancel culture is the right way to get consequences? And if not, what do you think is like a better way to make, you know, celebrities or other people that are canceled accountable for their actions?
Kind of going back to what I said just prior to you talking. I think if it's like that's a tricky one actually, because
Yeah, it's tough.
in that instance to hold people accountable, specifically celebrities, it kind of is a good thing. So I guess that's kind of a positive example. but the issue lies in the fact that it goes to a very high extreme, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much with celebrities, but it ends up being bad, pretty bad for them. But like right off the top of my head, after you said that, would be like some sort of like government penalty. But that goes back to the issue which I said earlier, that if the government does kind of get involved, then that is an infringement on free speech. Um, so yeah, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. So just kind of like to throw out an example to kind of like make it more cut and dry, right? It's like we'll make me a celebrity, right? And you know, I'm on Jimmy Kimmel or whatever, and I am like dropping the N word left and right. You know, like it's just
Classic
getting
Tanner.
crazy. It's just getting crazy, right? And I'm clearly in the wrong. Like there's no excuse, right? Do I deserve to be canceled and just kind of see where the repercussions of being canceled take me? Or if that's not the solution, what would you guys have as the ideal like solution to that?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of said this a little bit earlier, but it's like what can be done and what should be done. And in terms of what can be done, it's incredibly hard to cancel culture because it's not like it's lawfully done. And well, it is lawfully done, but it's not in place by law in the first place. Um, but you know, we talk about like how there are all these things where cancel culture has ended up resulting in some very good things overall for the benefit of society. But you know, when it comes down to it, I really don't think anybody should be canceled in the sense of being canceled because, like, even if I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel has some racist person being on, or homophobic person, or transphobic person, or all three at the same time, or anything like that. And if that is clearly being promoted, like, yeah, I do think that's a terrible thing. At the same time, free speech is a thing, so they can do that, of course. And I feel like society, if it chooses to, you know, not want to subscribe to those things, they'll kind of naturally cancel it in its own way. But it's so difficult because at the same time, that's kind of what cancelization is. But certainly on like a smaller scale where it comes down to like where it's very less about what's right and what's wrong and what you like versus what you dislike, with the Chicago professor. I don't think that should ever be taken into account. And the reason why Chicago took action against it was because they cared so much about like the opinions of the people and that sort of thing. In that way, cancelization can't have power unless, you know, organizations give it power. So I guess where it would be solved is just trying to get organizations to back people and care more about freedom of speech. And I don't know, I think you would have to cancel or counteract cancel culture in some way directly. At the same time, it's crazy hard because cancel
Yeah.
culture is not a single entity. It's so many different people, and most of the time they're faceless. So this is why it's such a complex subject about what can be done about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to be black and white with something that, you know, doesn't have rules governing it. It doesn't have, you know, one entity. It's a thousand, a million entities coming together and like being one just mass that all has different ideas of justice, what's right and wrong, what the consequences should be, etc.
But yeah, one last instance that I wanted to talk about with you guys is Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard, because that kind of combines the Me Too movement with the cancel culture movement. And like it's kind of interesting because there are sort of two sides about it. So Tanner, do you want to go into that?
The one thing that's different about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is
Yeah.
it's like two forces of cancel culture like fighting against each other. Like there's everybody backing Johnny Depp. They're like Amber Heard was abusing him. Like you should have seen like the things that she did to him. His psychological traumas are real. And then there's the cancel side from Amber Heard being like Johnny Depp was a drunk. He was like never good to her. He was the one abusing her. You know, it's like two opposing cancellation forces.
It turned.
Right.
I
Let's
think
talk
it
about
turned in. I turned into a very he said she said type deal.
Yeah, exactly.
To
It's a very messy trial.
because like yeah, I've like on my YouTube recommended one time, I got one of those videos that it was more favoring Johnny Depp, and it showed like subtle things he'd do like during press conferences and stuff. Like I think during one of them, like his knuckle was like split open or something, and then one of like his fellow
Sheesh.
actresses like asked him what happened. He's like, oh nothing, and he brushed it off. And then later on, like, and then it showed like a clip of like during the court trial or whatever. He said like something about like, oh, you threw a bottle at me and it broke on like my hand or something. To which she'd be like, oh, whatever. Like she'd like discredit it. So it's a very complicated one. Where it's just a he said she said thing.
It's very messy. Yeah. I think Johnny Depp ended up winning, if I remember right.
In a way, because like I think as far as like we go how handling cancellation goes, I think Johnny Depp has done it the worst from how I've seen it, because like he is such a low key kind of guy in his personality. So he isn't really going out there and saying like, no, I didn't do this. Amber Heard is wrong. He's not freaking out about it. So like, I don't feel like there's that many people that, well, I mean, maybe it's changed now, but definitely when the result came out that like, hey, he was abused and Johnny Depp is like, he's fine. I feel like there weren't that many people that were even aware of it. And like, I think he still lost a lot of acting opportunities. I think he lost his job in like the newest Harry Potter series and stuff like that.
Wasn't he also taken away from like Pirates of the Caribbean or something?
I don't think they would do that. But
that's like killing the series.
He's literally that serious. Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of unfortunate because that hasn't been resolved, because obviously he should pretty much get his job back. And I don't know if they had already assigned another actor, but it kind of goes to show that, you know, the cancellation, at least even attempts at cancellation, can significantly impact somebody's life.
Yeah, see, and that's the scary thing about cancel culture, is that even though the majority of the court's decision ruled in favor of Johnny Depp, the cancel culture damage was already done. Like that was said and done. There's no reversing cancel culture per se. Like you can backtrack a little bit, but you know, like you said, the damage was done to his career. And that's tough because, you know, these opposing forces were so dead set on ruining each other's lives that even when everything was said and done and like the court came up with an actual like judicial decision, like their careers are still going to have those stains on them from, you know, everybody taking away from their acting career, taking sides, throwing shots at each other, you know. And that's just one of the big downfalls of cancel culture, is that like you have to understand that what they're doing, what cancel culture is doing, is not just it can be, but it's not necessarily just going to be a temporary thing. It could also be a more permanent thing. And because you don't have that control over it, you have to be very, very, very careful about what you invest your anger and your, you know, distaste towards when you're involving yourself in cancel culture. So I had kind of something I wanted to maybe throw out for you guys as kind of like a broad statement for cancel culture. But what would you think about maybe saying that the way to kind of move cancel culture to a more positive thing is if it, and you can obviously disagree because everything's opinionated, everything's up for debate. That's what makes podcasts and all this interesting.
Yeah.
But what would you say about the statement that if cancel culture took a shift from something that was more intentional to something that's more natural, then it might be a little bit better? And what I mean by that is like, so say, you know, somebody does something that's obviously, you know, not up to standard, like it is clearly a violation. Instead of having cancel culture be something where you intentionally go out of your way to cause like more I don't want to say attention because sometimes attention to a subject can be a good thing, but more like distress. How about instead of that, it becomes a more natural thing where you remove yourself from what's giving them attention. So for Dave Chappelle, right? If you think that he deserved to be canceled, instead of intentionally, posting all over Instagram that he's, you know, um, against LGBTQ, instead you remove yourself. You unfollow him on Instagram. You stop following him, or you stop watching his specials. You stop, watching him on YouTube. Anything that gives him monetary stuff. So that way, instead of an intentional consequence, it's a natural consequence.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to. So I agree. In the ideal world, that's a perfect thing to happen, but it's just the fact that people, even though they're trying to cancel someone, they kind of want that attention. I imagine to an
Yeah.
extent.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, but like if you want to cancel, like once they do, say they succeed in canceling Dave Chappelle, and he somehow finds a way to release another special, I still imagine people are gonna want to view it just so they can say like, oh, I disapprove of it with that, and so they have like some context of what he said, because
Agreed.
just human nature is like too curious on on things that they don't necessarily know. But yeah, I feel like everyone should strive to towards that more natural sort of cancellation of like celebrities and just people who kind of deserve it, kind of asked for it.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think, Marcus?
Yeah, I feel like we've found out throughout this podcast that identifying what can be done about cancel culture is pretty difficult. But as far as things that would be ideal, I think if I can pinpoint one thing about cancel culture that is maybe the root of most of the problems behind it, is the mob mentality. Because at its core, cancel culture is wanting to expose something that somebody thinks needs something to happen about it. And I do think that if we had a discussion about these sorts of things, a civil discussion that wasn't crazy, I feel like that would be really beneficial to society. So I feel like if people just cared more about like actually educating themselves about these sorts of things, and just talk civilly, like I feel like that would be so much better. Because kind of something that I read about briefly about Demi Lovato was on their case, in their apology, because they issued apology shortly after trying to cancel the Froyo shop. But they said that like a couple of things, but basically they said that like it was kind of the heat of the moment. I felt really passionate, and that's why I said the things I did. And I feel like if that can be avoided, if at all possible, in any small way, just across cancel culture in general, I feel like it would be so much more constructive for society and for conversations in general. And I feel like that would be a way less toxic way to try to make the changes that these people are trying to push. So I feel like if we can all just kind of relax and
Yeah, for
just
sure.
on these things that don't need to be quite as heated, but can still be talked about with the attention that they probably deserve, then that would probably be the way forward.
That's right. Just making it more productive instead of malicious. No, I think that that's a good like conclusion to how cancel culture could ideally, in an ideal world, shift to maybe a more positive thing.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. We always appreciate you. Every view, every like means the world to us. It's so cool. And thank you, Tanner, for being on. You were awesome, man.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Thank you. This has been awesome.
Yeah, so much fun. We should definitely do it again. Yeah, so as always, we are on YouTube, we're on Spotify, TikTok, Instagram, technically SoundCloud, although there's just the first 3 episodes there. And then Tanner, would you like to shout out anything, or are you all good?
I do a lot of I put a lot of political stuff on my story on Instagram. If you're interested in seeing some of my political stories, my tag is Tanner_Rima. just if you're interested in more political views that I kind of put out there from time to time. But other than that, yeah.
Awesome, man. So you can follow Tanner down at the top of the description in YouTube. And I imagine that we would also put it in any other place that we can put it on Instagram or TikTok, anything like that. But yeah, at the top of the description in YouTube, that's where Tanner's Instagram will be. Yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.